Book of Heaven, Volume 17, Part 14. June 29th, 1925. Neither fears, nor doubts, nor any danger at all can enter into the divine will. Just as the works of Jesus had their complete fruit after his death, so it shall be with Luisa. In the divine will, there are no nights, nor sleep. It is always full daylight and full vigil. I was feeling oppressed, and a thought wanted to disturb the serenity of my mind. And if you found yourself at the point of death, and doubts and fears came to you about the way you conducted yourself during your life, to the point of making you doubt about your salvation, what would you do? But as I was thinking about this, my sweet Jesus gave me no time to reflect any further, or to answer my thought. Moving in my interior, he made himself seen shaking his head, and as though saddened by my thought, he told me, "My daughter, what are you saying? To think about this is an affront to my will. Neither fears, nor doubts, nor any danger at all can enter into it. These are things that do not belong to it. Rather, they are the miserable rags of the human will. My will is like a placid sea that murmurs peace, happiness, safety, certainty. And the waves it releases from its bosom are waves of joys and of contentments without end. Therefore, in seeing you think about this, I was shaken. My will is not capable of fears, of doubts, of danger, and the soul who lives in it becomes estranged to the miserable rags of the human will. And besides, what could my will fear? Who can ever raise doubts about its operating, if before the sanctity of my operating will all tremble and are forced to lower their foreheads, adoring the operating of my will? Even more, I want to tell you something very consoling for you, and of great glory for me. It shall happen with you at your dying in time, just as it happened with me at my death. In life, I operated, I prayed, I preached, I instituted sacraments, I suffered unheard of pains, and even death itself. But I can say that my humanity saw almost nothing compared to the great good it had done, nor did the very sacraments have life as long as I remained on earth. As soon as I died, my death put a seal upon all my works, my words, my pains, the sacraments, and the fruit of my death confirmed everything I did, and made my works, my pains, my words, my sacraments that I instituted, as well as the continuation of their life until the consummation of the centuries, rise again to life. So my death put all my works in motion, and made them rise again to perennial life. All this was right. In fact, since my humanity contained the eternal Word and a will that has no beginning and no end, and that is not subject to dying, nothing was to perish of all that it did, not even a single word, but everything was to have continuation until the end of the centuries, in order to pass into heaven, to beatify all the blessed eternally. The same shall happen with you. My will that lives in you, speaks to you, makes you operate and suffer, shall let nothing perish, not even a single word of the so many truths I have manifested to you about my will. It shall put everything in motion. It shall make everything rise again. Your death shall be the confirmation of everything I have told you. And since in the living in my will, everything that the soul does, suffers, prays, and says, contains an act of divine will, all this shall not be subject to dying, but shall remain in the world like many lives, all in the act of giving life to creatures. Therefore your death shall tear the veils that cover all the truths I have spoken to you, and they shall rise again like many suns, such as to dispel all the doubts and difficulties with which they seem to be covered in life. So, as long as you live in this low world, you shall see little or nothing in others of all the great good that my will wants to do through you. But after your death, it shall have its full effect. After this, I spent the night without being able to close my eyes, either to sleep or to receive the usual visits of my lovable Jesus, since when he comes, I doze off within him, and for me this is more than sleep. However, I spent that time doing the hours of his passion and making the usual rounds in his adorable will. Then I saw it was daylight, but this happens to me often, and I said to myself, "My love, neither did you come, nor did you let me sleep. So how shall I go on today without you?" At that moment, my sweet Jesus moved in my interior, telling me, "My daughter, in my will there are no nights, nor sleep. It is always full daylight and full vigil. There is no time to sleep, because there is much to do, to take, and to be happy in it. Therefore you must learn to live in the long day of my will, so that my will may have its life of continuous attitude within you. However, you shall find the most beautiful rest, because my will shall make you rise more and more into your God, and shall make you comprehend him more. And the more you comprehend him, the more your soul shall be expanded, in order to receive that eternal rest, with all the happinesses and joys that the divine rest contains. Oh, what a beautiful rest shall this be for you, a rest that can be found only in my will." Now, while he was saying this, he came out from within my interior, and throwing his arms around my neck, he clasped me tightly to himself, and I stretched out my arms and clasped him tightly to myself. In the meantime, my sweet Jesus was calling many people who were clinging to his feet, and Jesus was saying to them, "Rise up to my heart, and I shall show you the portents that my will has done in this soul." Having said this, he disappeared. July 9th, 1925. Suffering, together with Jesus, serves as a continuous knocking, with which Jesus knocks at the doors of the soul, and the soul at his. I felt I could no longer be without my sweet Jesus. For several days I had to long for his return, but in vain. I would say to him from the heart, "My love, come back to your little daughter. Don't you see that I can take no more? To what a hard martyrdom you expose my poor existence by depriving me of yourself." And tired and exhausted, I would abandon myself in his most holy will. Now, while I was in this state, I was reading, and I felt someone extending his arms around my neck. My mind became drowsy, and I found myself clasped in the arms of Jesus, all overshadowed and hidden in him. I wanted to tell him of my sorrow, but he gave me no time to do it. Then Jesus spoke, telling me, "My daughter, don't you want to convince yourself that when my justice, out of a just reason, wants to chastise the people, I am forced to hide from you? In fact, you are nothing other than a little particle that binds all other particles of the other creatures, and being in a familiar relationship with you, and as though in feast, and wanting to strike the other particles bound to you, my justice finds itself in a contrast, and feels dissuaded from striking the other particles. So, during these past days, there have been chastisements in the world, and I have remained hidden from you, but always within you." Now, as he was saying this, I found myself outside of myself, and he showed me how in various points of the earth there had been earthquakes at some places, grave fires, with death of people at some other places, and other troubles someplace else. And it seemed that more grave evils would follow. I was frightened, and I prayed. Then my lovable Jesus came back, and before him I saw myself totally ugly, as though withered, and I said to him, "My life and my all, look at me, how ugly I have become, how I am about to wither. Ah, how I change without you. Your pervasion makes me lose the freshness, the beauty. I feel I am under a scorching sun, that draining me of all vital humors makes me wither and be consumed." Then Jesus made me suffer a little bit together with him. That suffering turned into celestial dew over my soul, that restored the vital humors in me. Then, taking my poor soul in his hands, he added, "Poor daughter of mine, do not fear. If my privation made you wither, my return shall give you back freshness, beauty, color, and all of my features. And your suffering together with me shall not only be like dew that rejuvenates you, but shall serve as a continuous knocking, with which I can knock at the doors of your soul, and you at mine, so that the doors may remain always open, and you may enter freely into me, and I into you. And my breath shall serve you as breeze, to preserve in you the beautiful freshness with which I created you." And as he was saying this, he blew very strongly over me, and clasping me to himself, he disappeared from me. July 20th, 1925. The state of immobility in which grace is put by souls. The soul who lives in the divine will is the favorite of grace. As I was in my usual state, after going through most bitter privations of my sweet Jesus, finally he made himself seen, and without saying even a word to me, he put me in a painful position, in perfect immobility. I felt the life, but I had no motion. I felt the breath, but I could not breathe. My whole person had not even the slightest motion. And while feeling pain, I was unable to writhe because of the pain that I felt. But I was forced, by the presence of Jesus and by his most holy will, to remain immobile. Then, when my blessed Jesus pleased to do so, he extended his arms as though to grab me and clasp me to his bosom, and he said to me, "My daughter, have you seen how painful is the state of immobility? It is the hardest state, because even while feeling bitter pains, motion is a relief. It is a sign of life. Contortions are mute voices that ask for help and stir those who are around to compassion. You have experienced how painful that is. But do you know why I put you in this state of immobility? To make you comprehend the state in which my grace finds itself, and to receive a reparation from you. Oh, in what a state of immobility does my grace find itself! It is life and continuous motion, and is in continuous act of giving itself to creatures. But creatures reject it, and render it immobile. It feels the life. It wants to give life. But it is forced by human ingratitude to remain immobile and without motion. What pain! My grace is light, and as light it naturally spreads. But creatures do nothing but release darkness. And while my light wants to enter into them, the darkness that they spread paralyzes my light and renders it as though immobile and without life for creatures. My grace is love, and contains the virtue of being able to ignite all. But the creature, loving something else, renders this love as though dead for herself. And my grace feels the most harrowing pain of the state of immobility in which creatures put it. Oh, in what most painful constraints does my grace find itself! And this not only from those who openly are said to be evil, but also from those who are said to be religious, pious souls. And many times, because of trifles, because of something that is not to their liking, a whim, a most vile attachment, or because they do not find the satisfaction of their own wills in the very holy things, while my grace is all motion and life for them, they render it immobile, and they cling to what they like, to their whim, to human attachments, and to everything in which they feel the satisfaction of their own self. So in the place of my grace, they put their own self as life and as their own idol. But do you know who is the Comforter, the indivisible companion, the enrapturer who raptures the motion and the life of my grace? Even more, she accelerates its motion more and more, and does not render it immobile, not even for one instant. The one who lives in my will. Where my will reigns, my grace is always in motion. It is always in feast. It has always something to do. It is never left grieving or idle. The soul in whom my will reigns is the favorite of my grace. She is its little secretary, in whom it deposits the secrets of its sorrows and of its joys. It entrusts everything to her, because my will has sufficient space to receive the deposit that my grace contains, because she is nothing other than a continuous birth from my supreme will. August 2nd, 1925. The I love you is everything. The work of Luisa with the Celestial Mamma. I was praying, infusing myself in the holy divine volition. I wanted to make my round everywhere, up into the Empyrean, in order to find the supreme I love you that is not subject to any interruption. I wanted to make it my own, so that I too might have an I love you, never interrupted, that might echo the eternal I love you. And by possessing within myself the source of the true I love you, I might have an I love you for all, for each one, for each motion, for each act, for each breath, for each heartbeat, and for each I love you of my Jesus himself. And as I seemed to reach the bosom of the Eternal One, making their I love you my own, I kept repeating everywhere and upon each thing a sing-song of I love yous for my Supreme Lord. Now, while I was doing this, my thought interrupted my I love you, telling me, "What are you doing? You could be doing something else. And besides, what is this I love you? How special at all is it?" And my sweet Jesus, as though moving hurriedly in my interior, told me, "What? How special at all is the I love you for me? My daughter, the I love you is everything. The I love you is love, is veneration, is esteem. It is heroism. It is sacrifice. It is trust toward the one to whom it is directed. The I love you is to possess the one who encloses the I love you. The I love you is a small word, but it weighs as much as the whole eternity. The I love you encloses everything, envelops everyone. It diffuses, it restricts itself, it rises up high, it descends down below. It impresses itself everywhere, but it never stops. How can you say this, my daughter? How special at all is the I love you? Its origin is eternal. In the I love you, the Celestial Father generated me. And in the I love you, the Holy Spirit proceeded. In the I love you, the eternal Fiat issued the whole creation. And in the I love you, it forgave guilty man and redeemed him. So, in the I love you, the soul finds everything in God, and God finds everything in the soul. Therefore, the value of the I love you is infinite. It is full of life and of energy. It never tires. It surpasses everything and triumphs of everything. And so, this I love you for me, I want to see on your lips, in your heart, in the flight of your thoughts, in the drops of your blood, in the pains and in the joys, in the food you take, in everything. The life of my I love you must be very, very long in you, and my Fiat reigning in you shall place on it the seal of the divine I love you. After this, a sun made itself present before my mind at an extremely high point. Its light was inaccessible. From the center of it came out continuous little flames, each one containing an I love you. And as they were coming out, they placed themselves as though in order around this inaccessible light. However, these little flames remained as though bound with a thread of light to that inaccessible light that nourished the life of the little flames. These little flames were so many as to fill heaven and earth. I seemed to see our God as the beginning and origin of everything. and the little flames, the whole of creation, as a divine birth, and of pure love. I too was a little flame, and my sweet Jesus pushed me to take flight through each little flame, in order to place on them the double I love you. I don't know how. I found myself outside of myself, to make my round in the midst of those little flames, and impress my I love you upon each one of them. But they were so many that I would get lost. However, a supreme force would make me resume the order and the round of my I love you. Then afterwards I found myself inside a vast garden, and to my surprise I found my queen mamma, who, drawing near me, told me, "My daughter, come with me to work in this garden. We must plant in it celestial and divine flowers and fruits. It is now almost empty, and if there is any plant at all, it is terrestrial and human. Therefore we have to root them out, so that this garden may be fully pleasing to my Son Jesus. The seeds that we must plant are all my virtues, my works, my pains, that contain the seed of the Fiat voluntas tua. There was nothing I did that did not contain this seed of the will of God. I would have contented myself with doing nothing, rather than operating or suffering without this seed. All my glory, the dignity of mother, the height of queen, the supremacy over all, came to me from this seed. The whole of creation, all beings, recognized me as dominating over them, because they saw in me, reigning, the supreme will. Therefore we shall unite everything I did, together with everything you have done with this seed of the supreme volition, and we shall plant it in this garden. So we fused the seeds that my celestial mamma had, that were many, together with a few of mine, that I don't know how I found, and we began to form little holes in which to place the seeds. But while we were doing this, from behind the walls of the garden, that were extremely high, we heard noises of weapons, of cannons, and they were fighting in a horrible way. So we were forced to run in order to give help. As we arrived there, we saw peoples of various races, of different colors, and many nations united together, who were battling and striking terror and fright. But while I was seeing this, I found myself inside myself, but with such fright, and also with the sorrow of having said not even a word to my celestial mamma about my hard state. May the most holy will of God be always blessed, and may everything be for his glory. August 4th, 1925. The one who lives in the divine will is in communication with all creation and is sustained by all the works of her Creator. After going through various days of total privation of my most sweet Jesus, I kept repeating my sorrowful refrain. Everything is over for me. I shall never see him again. I shall never again hear his voice that so much delighted me. I've been abandoned by he who formed all my contentment and was everything to me. What a prolonged martyrdom! What life without life, without Jesus! But while my heart was drowned with pains, my sweet Jesus came out from within my interior, and as he took me in his arms, I threw my arms around his neck, abandoning my head upon his breast, as I could take no more. And Jesus, squeezing me tightly to himself, leaned his knees on my breast, pressing on it very strongly, and he said to me, "My daughter, you must die continuously." And as he was saying this, he shared various pains with me. Then, assuming a more affable look, he added, "My daughter, what do you fear if in you there is the power of my will? And it is so true that this will of mine is in you, that in one instant I transformed you into my pains, and you, with love, offered yourself to receive them. And as you were suffering, you stretched out your arms to embrace my will. And while you were embracing it, everything that lives in my will, that is, the angels, the saints, my celestial mamma, the very divinity, felt the tightness of your embrace, and they all ran toward you to embrace you in return. And in chorus they said, 'How pleasing and dear is the embrace of our little exiled one, who lives on earth to do the will of God alone, just as we do it in heaven. She is our joy. She is the new and only feast that comes to us from the earth.' Oh, if you knew what it means to live in my will. There is no division between the soul and heaven. Wherever my will is, she is also. Her acts, her pains, her words are in act and operating in any place in which my will is present. And since my will is everywhere, the soul places herself in the order of creation, and through the electricity of the supreme volition, she is in communication with all created things. And just as created things are in order and harmony among themselves, each one is the support of the other, and not one of them can move. And may this never be. If even just one thing created by me should move, the creation would be all upset. There is a secret among them, a mysterious force, such that, while they live suspended in the air, without any support, by the force of communication that they have among themselves, each one sustains the other. In the same way, the one who does my will is in communication with all, and is sustained by all the works of her Creator. Therefore all recognize her, love her, and offer to her the electricity, the secret of living together with them, suspended between heaven and earth, all sustained only by the force of the Supreme Will. You have reached the end of Volume 17. Fiat.